Well, it's high time for another Ancestry Sidebar, and today we will talk about a special connection in the USA to the Slovak village of Závadka. In the Slovak Ancestry Adventure series, which I will link to in the description, the Závadka episode covered my great-grandmother Anna Hardy, who later became Anna Ruman. She was of the Greek Catholic faith, which I also covered in some detail then. That Greek Catholic heritage links to what in the USA is typically called Byzantine Catholic. To explore the special connection I mentioned, we're going to visit St. Michael's Cemetery in Hermitage, Pennsylvania. As we pan around the surrounding countryside and sweep down, we'll arrive at the physical embodiment of that special connection, which is this crucifix in the center of the cemetery. Let's back up a little bit and talk about where we are. Hermitage and nearby Farrell, Pennsylvania, are in Mercer County in the northwestern part of the state, about 70 miles north of Pittsburgh and less than 20 miles northeast of Youngstown, Ohio. This 1860 map shows the small town of Sharon and another called Middlesex, with not too much in between. This is well before the coal and steel boom that was to come, and the area looks pretty sleepy. Fast forwarding to 1889, this map shows less detail, but does indicate those same towns, plus others including Hermitage and Wheatland. But no community is indicated between Wheatland and Sharon. That has changed by the time these USGS maps were published. There's a color difference in the digital copies, but these are adjacent maps. The Youngstown, Ohio quad on the left from 1906, and the Neshannock, Pennsylvania quad from 1907 on the right. Again, we see Sharon, Wheatland, Hermitage, but a town called South Sharon has also popped up between Sharon and Wheatland. This town developed around a steel plant built on this site. It wasn't until 1912 that the town chose to change its name to Farrell, perhaps thinking it would butter up one James A. Farrell, who had recently become president of the U.S. Steel Corporation. The change probably didn't do anything to hurt Mr. Farrell's ego, although it's not clear that the town benefited any further from the rebranding campaign. By the publication of this 1924 Rand McNally Atlas, Farrell is indicated as the name of the town between Sharon and Wheatland. Now that we've established where Farrell is, you might remember that I mentioned St. Michael's Cemetery being in Hermitage, Pennsylvania. Well, indeed it is, but St. Michael's Byzantine Catholic Church first formed in Farrell in 1905 and only later moved to Hermitage. In 1918, the 12 acres of land that now constitute the cemetery were purchased a few miles away from the church. Knowing where we are, let's get to why we're here. One grave marker has a particular connection to my family. This is where my great-grandmother's brother, George Hardy, is buried. George came to the USA in 1898, 4 years before his younger sister, my great-grandmother Anna, although Anna did not settle in Farrell. During that period, many people were leaving Závadka, as I illustrated in the Slovak Ancestry Adventure series. Although I don't have specific numbers, many of those buried in St. Michael's came from Závadka and eventually settled in the Farrell Hermitage area. I mentioned in a previous sidebar episode, also linked in the description, that beginning in 1881, the baptism records in Závadka started to list some fathers as in Americam emigrans, meaning they had emigrated to America by the time the child was born back in Závadka. The wives and children often followed later. Let's look at this analysis of Závadka baptism records from 1881 to 1895 to illustrate a point. The upper line shows the total number of baptisms per year in the village. The lower line is the number of baptism records that contain the in Americam emigrans comment for the child's father. Notice the shift in the overall baptism rate between the first 6 years and the following 9 years. The average shifts from about 71 baptisms per year to about 47. Meanwhile, the lower line shows absent fathers representing an average of 5% of all baptisms over the first 5 years of data, but 16% of all baptisms over the subsequent 10-year span. From the baptism records, we can only discern the married men who left behind a pregnant wife. It is reasonable to assume other married men left whose wives were not pregnant, and that single men left as well, and that at some point the families of the married men would eventually follow. All this leads to the dire population trend that Závadka faced during the years of peak European immigration to America. George Hardy's grave marker is written in the Latin alphabet. Many markers in St. Michael's are written in the Cyrillic alphabet, which is commonly used in the Eastern Rite Church communities in Slovakia as well. But the most direct connection is the crucifix itself, as indicated by the inscription on its pedestal, which translates to "Offered by the parishioners from Závadka to the members of St. Michael's Church in Farrell, Pennsylvania." As a listener pointed out, this could be interpreted in two ways. This could imply that parishioners in Závadka at the time made a contribution of the crucifix. It could also imply that it is parishioners from Závadka originally, but now living in the Farrell area, contributing to the creation of the crucifix. It is dated 1916. Recall that St. Michael's Church did not buy this cemetery property until 1918. I suppose the crucifix must have stood somewhere else before being moved here when the cemetery grounds were consecrated. Aside from its obvious religious symbolism, this crucifix also stands for the familial and spiritual relationship between the people who remained in Závadka and those from the village who came to the Farrell Hermitage area. Závadka had a declining population, was very poor, and was still part of an Austro-Hungarian empire which was in the middle of fighting World War I. In contrast, Farrell at the time represented a growing and increasingly prosperous land that had not forgotten its roots. For this reason, I believe the interpretation of the inscription should be, it is the parishioners who were in Farrell, Pennsylvania, but came from Závadka, who made possible this crucifix as a monument to their homeland. I hope you enjoyed learning about this special connection between Závadka and Farrell Hermitage, Pennsylvania. Let me know if you have a connection to these places, or if you know of any other symbols of similar relationships. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. See you next time.